So let's dig into the brain science of stress and resiliency. And very specifically, let's take a look at our brains, the brain of the human being, and very specifically the most simple cut you can take of our brain divided. That is the frontal lobe, the mind, and the back brain, which we generally consider as the heart. The frontal lobe, the neocortex, relatively new, hence neo, has your executive functions, your decision making, your planning, your language, your reason, your ethics. It's quite slow. It takes about 3/10 of a second to process anything. So you're sort of always running to catch up. You're about 3/10 behind. And the back brain, which is your limbic system, which includes the amygdala and hippocampus, is your seat of emotions and of your fight, flight, freeze responses to stress. Your stress responses sit here. It's also your seat of intuition, and it's very fast. It works in about 3/100ths of a second. And this gap between the back brain and the front brain is important. So let's take this a little further and consider a metaphor from Jonathan Haidt from his great book, The Happiness Hypothesis. And he makes this amazing metaphor that your neocortex, your front brain, is much like a tiny rider on the back of a giant elephant. So the front brain is the rider, the back brain is the elephant. The rider, the you think you are, your conscious mind, where your language is, it's rational and directive and analytical and it plans. But the elephant, well, it's the doer, right? It's instinctive, it's emotional, it is the engine. If you know anything about psychology, you know that if you don't engage the emotions, i.e. the elephant, you don't actually get anything done. The elephant does all the work. So here's the question. Who's in charge under stress? So if you think about it, if you're a tiny rider in the back of the elephant, you're in charge as everything is fine and calm. You can make it go forward, make it go back, turn left, drink some water, and then the mouse appears. And then who is in charge? Well, naturally, the elephant. This is when your stress response system takes over, fight, flight, or freeze. Now, this is very, very adaptive for tens of thousands, if not longer, of years of human history, because in the old days, stresses often meant life danger. And it was perfectly appropriate when an elephant came roaring out of the jungle or somebody came at you with a sword that you fight like crazy, you run like crazy, or you play dead, or some combination of all three. But that is not so adaptive in modern society. When you get a snarky email from a coworker, you don't want to run over and claw their eyes out. You don't want to run away and never talk to them again. And you don't want to sit at your desk frozen for hours because you don't know what to do or say. But that is what happens. The elephant can't tell the difference between the types of stressors. And so what happens is something called limbic hijack, where we get taken over by a back brain and we start to respond in maladaptive ways to stresses that don't require that kind of response. So how do we deal with this? Well, first, let's talk about stress and performance. This is a Urex Dodson curve. It's been around since 1908. We've known that counterintuitively, we don't actually perform best under low stress. We perform best under a certain level of stress. So not super high, not super low. If it's too low, we're unengaged, we're not emotionally committed. If it's too high, well, then we're overwhelmed. So there's this sort of notion of work-life balance, and we put efforts into getting into the middle of this curve where we've got enough going on that we're fully involved with what's going on in our work, but we're not so overwhelmed that our work is impaired. So I will often do, when I speak to groups, I'll ask people where they are. I'm like, all right, who here needs more stress in their life? Now, every once in a while, I do get a hand raise. I'm not sure it's true, but maybe it is. Maybe some people actually are just sort of underwhelmed in their current life. I ask how many are currently optimal. I usually get a couple hands, but a vast, vast majority, we're talking more than 90, 95% of people raise their hands when I say, who here is over on this far right side of the curve? Overwhelmed, too much stress, too much going on. And then I tell them the truth, just like I'm going to do with you right now. No judgment, but if you are on the far right of this curve and you are overwhelmed with stress, that means you are not the best husband, brother, sister, son, follower, leader that you can be. You just aren't. You could be a better person, better under pressure, better under the circumstances you're dealing with if you are more balanced. So this is why people try to get work-life balance back. But the thing is, we know that the stresses of particularly business life, are not getting smaller, they're getting bigger. The pace isn't slowing down, it's getting faster. So this idea of just getting balance, it doesn't actually work. And maybe you've played the game I played where on this curve, I get overwhelmed. This happened to me for like a decade. I get overwhelmed, too much going on. I decide to quit some stuff, get out of some stuff, got to sort of crawl my way back up the curve to the middle to where I finally get to a place where I'm like, okay. I'm sort of back in control, back in the saddle as the rider, and then you do this thing. You take a deep breath, and then you have a baby, or you build a house, or you take a new job, or you move, and you take on this whole new onslaught of stress, and you slide right back down the curve till you're overstressed. And then you do the crawl again, and you pick your way back, and you eventually get right to the center. And as a high-achieving person, which by watching this video you almost for sure are, that means you're going to take the next big thing and slide right back down the curve. I did this for like 10 years. I played that game over and over again. But it doesn't work. This is suboptimal. So how to develop resiliency? Well, you need to simply shift the curve up and to the right. This looks a lot like a bicep, right? If you work a bicep properly, it grows, and then you can actually take on more stress and perform better. So this is my definition of resiliency, is performing better under greater stress and learning to like it. So how do you shift that curve up and to the right? Well, there's 3 mechanisms you have to do. We're going to get into each one, but it's reduce first, recover second, and then learn how to raise and reframe your relationship with stress so that you can take on more and enjoy it. All right, coming up next.